those signs, those virtue signaling signs, hate has no home here. And we like, Muslims, we like Jews, we like gays.
Yep.
They don't like Republicans. That's what's always missing from those signs.
Welcome to Real Clear Politics for Thursday, October 30th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and joining me are RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So, gentlemen, before we start the show, we should talk about our news, which is that starting next Wednesday, November 5th, we are moving to a new time slot and a new channel. Real Clear Politics will be carried on the brand new Megyn Kelly channel on SiriusXM. It's channel 111, and we will be on at 11 a.m. live 5 days a week, leading into Megyn's show, which begins at noon. We'll still be on YouTube and the podcast apps just like we are now, so that isn't changing. But it is a pretty exciting move for us. We'll still be working with the same great team here at SiriusXM, so we're grateful for that. So Tom, I know you were one of the drivers behind this, so congratulations. And what do you think of the news?
Well, congratulations to us. Look, it's exciting. This is, Sirius approached us about this opportunity, and Megyn has been a friend of the show. She's had us on her show a number of times. She's a big fan of this show and the podcast, and so it made a lot of sense. We're going to be moving up in the day, which. And we're also going to be doing it live, which is something that we haven't done before, which I think we're all a little nervous about. The net under the trapeze is going to be taken away. No, but it's exciting, and Megyn is great, and our show is going to be our show. We're still going to do exactly what we've been doing here on POTUS, which is give our sort of unvarnished analysis of the news of the day, and with the same sort of flavor that we have. Agreeing and disagreeing as we do on various subjects. So same show, different time, different channel, but we're excited about it.
Carl, what do you think?
Well, we have done it live before at the conventions.
That's true.
And as I remember, we survived. So I'm what's that phrase? I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. It does mean that we all have to be on time, which will be a challenge for us, but we're looking forward to it.
Dear listeners, that remark was aimed at yours truly, Carl.
But it also means that we're done by around noon every day, which leaves a little more time for our day jobs and some golf. So
potentially,
it's a plus all the way around. Anyway, I'm excited about it too, and look forward to it.
So and we should say our last show on this channel on POTUS 124 is going to be on Friday.
That's right.
So
yeah,
we got a couple more days here.
Yeah, so we're here till Friday, and then Monday you can listen to us on the apps and on YouTube, and then we'll let you know what's going on. But definitely look for us next week on the new Megyn Kelly channel 111. But with that out of the way, let's dive into today's other news. Some other things were going on in our world. Includes reaction to President Donald Trump's meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. According to the White House, they've reached an agreement on soybean purchases, fentanyl, rare earth, and a preliminary trade deal that will walk back Trump's tariffs. So, Tom, the meeting lasted about an hour and 40 minutes. Trump gave it a score of 12 on a scale of 1 to 10. What do you give it?
Look, I think this has been a pretty successful trip for him. And this was obviously the big kahuna right here, this meeting between Trump and Xi. And he came out and said it was great. And we will see. The rare earth thing is a huge deal, and one that the administration was eager to tackle with Xi. But as Trump said, they're going to renegotiate this every year. This is a one-year deal. So we'll see how it goes and whether China actually sticks to the deal once the official, details of this deal are hammered out. And hopefully they will. But that's a year is not a long time. So they're probably going to turn right around and start negotiating the next deal to make sure that this stuff all stays on track. Obviously, China's a hugely important, I would say, frenemy, and adversary in many ways, certainly economically. And as I mentioned, with what they had done with the rare earths, they can exert some leverage on us. So we'll see how this works, I think. But as I said, I think overall it's been a pretty successful trip for Trump all the way around.
Well, they had they had already exerted pressure on us with they had President Trump had raised the tariffs on China, doubled them, and then they sort of seemed to go over 100%. I don't know where they are now. The New York Times said that if you take all the tariffs that the United States is levying against China, it's about 47% tariff rate. That's going to be lowered. But they had issued tariffs on US soybeans. The president got Argentina to, they were buying soybeans from Argentina. Our president made Argentina a much bigger player in the world soybean market, which is not something we normally talk about on our show because none of us are experts in agricultural policy. But now China's going to resume buying soybeans. So, what if you look at it from a distance, it seems like President Trump fixed the problems he caused, but it's better than
And
nothing.
fentanyl is the problem he caused.
Well, that's lip service, but he's pressuring the Chinese to do more to control the manufacture of fentanyl and the illegal importation to Mexico and the United States. That's something they should do anyway. Um, and whether they'll follow through on that, I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just on the fentanyl thing, it is kind of amazing that we would ask them to stop shipping illegal poison into our.
Well, it's already illegal in China.
I know, and that's what I'm saying.
The president
It's
is
like
asking him to do is to
yeah.
crack down on it. But
Yeah, well,
right? Shouldn't they be doing that, Andy? Just
yeah,
for
exactly.
simple
That's my
humanitarian.
point. Yeah. The other
But
thing
they're
is,
not.
well,
So
yes, and
Well, we'll see if they do anything.
we'll see if
on
they
that.
do because they have said they would before. Tom, I was struck they didn't talk about Taiwan at all. Trump said it just didn't come up.
that's
But
probably a good thing.
I
but
was
they
relieved.
Yeah.
but they did talk about Ukraine. They said, and I don't know if they talked about North Korea's missile testing or not. But that certainly wasn't anything that came in sort of the readout of the meeting. So I mean, what about those issues? Taiwan is very worried, as probably they should be, that somehow the Trump administration might sell them down the river in order to get a better trade deal
Yeah,
with China.
I don't know about that. It is a good thing that it's probably left undiscussed at this meeting, at least. But can I just go back to what Carl said? This idea that Donald Trump, solved the problems that he created. I was thinking about this the other day. I mean, one of the things that Trump ran on in 2017, 2016, and then 2020 and 2024 was that the status quo with China was unacceptable, and that decades of just sort of the traditional, exchange between the U.S. and China had led to America being in a terribly lopsided relationship with China vis-a-vis trade, and we've mentioned before intellectual property theft, rampant, never addressed. I mean, all of these things, and so has Trump's approach to China been chaotic and at times looking, haphazard? Yes. But that's part of his genius, I think. That's part of, I think, what the way Trump operates and why. I mean, even if you just took China and shook them by the lapels, and then we end up in the same place that we were 6 months ago, that's not a bad thing, in my opinion. And everyone's, oh, we started a trade war with China and it's the end of the world. Well, no, I mean, China was robbing us blind. And they are an important partner, and we should have a good trade relationship with them, but it should be based on, some rules of the road that both sides accept. And so I don't criticize Trump over the way he's approached his China trade policy, just for the mere fact that, what we'd been doing for so long had not been working. In fact, had been doing the opposite, and yet it just sort of went unremarked. Oh, we got to have a great relationship with China, even if they're, stabbing us in the back and robbing us blind.
Carl?
Well, that was such a spirited rant. I'm a little bit in
I left
awe.
you speechless.
Yeah.
You're in awe.
I guess you can't be speechless on the radio. The president also went to Japan and these other countries. I think he solved this is now his 50th peace deal he signed. There was some fighting between countries that we didn't know about, but Trump fixed it, according to Trump. The Japanese been worried about tariffs. There was some sort of negotiation going to come out of that. Tom's view is that this trip was successful, and you know When it comes to Donald Trump, if what was that line, Andy? You'll remember it. Was it John Foster Dulles? Was it Winston Churchill? He's a carries his the bull in a china shop. He's a bull who carries his own china cabinet with him. That's a little bit like Trump. And what Tom's saying is that the genius of this guy is that he's so unpredictable and so mercurial and does things by whim that these other leaders have to worry about him and pay attention to the United States in a way that they didn't before when it was all done through process and through ASEAN and through all these you know everything's litigated, everything's negotiated forever, nothing ever changes. And in that sense, Tom's got an optimistic view of of whether this foreign policy approach can work. And all I can say is I hope it does.
Well, my impression is that the relationship with China, you just contrast it with the relationship with Russia, for just as an example, is much more structured. That this meeting had a lot of advanced work done with it. It felt much more like a standard meeting with China and the U.S. They're pretty formalized dances that go on, as opposed to when he met with Putin and just flew him into Alaska and.
Well, in
So
support of
I
that
think
point, Andy, in support of that, you asked about Taiwan. Marco Rubio was on this trip, and he said before the trip, nothing in this trade deal is contemplated that will change anything with Taiwan. And he put it sort of classic State Department
right.
language. So I think they are more careful when it comes to
And I
China.
will say, well, go ahead, Tom.
No, I was just gonna say, I know we're running out of time, and I don't want to open up a whole other can of worms here, but we should talk about the gifts that we're giving, Carl. I thought the cherry blossoms was a really nice touch from Japan, but the South Koreans giving Trump a golden crown, I thought was just exceptional trolling by
Yes, you know
just,
and that picture is going to come out. He's got to put that thing on his head at some point.
I mean,
It's
trying
gonna
to
be
make
great.
liberal heads explode all over the United States, apparently.
Well, Trump
What are
knew
they doing?
Trump knew they were making fun of Trump and Trump's enemies simultaneously. He
Oh,
seemed to
Yeah.
appreciate it. It reminds me, though, on these previous trips, if we're going to talk about, if I'm going to be critical of Trump, remember when Joe Biden was president, he was taking Hunter Biden on these trips, and he
Mhm.
was doing side deals
Right.
to profit himself personally, and he was getting like expensive gold watches and stuff from the mayor. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
It
Well,
recedes into memory, but
anyway,
I don't know that Don Jr. and or Eric got expensive gifts of that type from Chinese
yeah.
businessmen or
All
politicians.
right. Well, we do have to go, but I do want to say just one other thing about the trip, which is that the fact on the flight home, he announced that he was going to restart nuclear testing. I don't think we should underestimate how much that fits into this narrative. He goes, he meets with these people, everything's great. And on his way home, he says, and by the way, we're going to restart nuclear testing. It's
Is
I
that in
don't know.
case they're tempted to not follow through and they're part of the
Yes,
agreement?
yeah. No, I think it was anyway, pretty
non-traditional
deft.
diplomacy,
Pretty
gentlemen.
deft, I thought. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. We'll be back in a minute. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. Don't go away. Guys, there's this article in The Atlantic today. It's by Michael Shearer, Missy Ryan, and Ashley Parker. And it reveals something that I find sort of amazing. Senior Trump officials, including Stephen Miller, Kristi Noem, Marco Rubio, and Pete Hegseth, have all moved their residences into military housing, basically moving on to bases in order to better protect themselves and their families. Carl, this is reportedly in the wake of the murder of Charlie Kirk. What does this say about the state of our politics, and what do you make of this? It's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, my guess is this may have even predated Charlie Kirk. The story opens with a vignette here in Arlington, where I live, of Stephen Miller's wife coming out of her house and confronted by a stranger who threatened her. In Arlington, Virginia. Well, that's there was somebody sentenced to prison for coming from California to harm Brett Kavanaugh. It wasn't just Charlie Kirk. The Atlantic said this is a grim reminder of how polarized our politics are, but that's a little bit of both siderism, because these threats come from the left, and so does this violent rhetoric, and extreme rhetoric, harsh rhetoric, not violent rhetoric. That's not quite right, but aimed at Trump and his administration. And the Democratic Party I think the Democratic Party has a problem here. If your followers think that you shouldn't be able to live in the community where you want to live, What does that mean? Is that a precursor to civil war? And it harks back to Maxine Waters in Trump's first term, saying these people should be confronted wherever they shop, wherever they go, wherever they want to eat. And I don't see it. I don't see that kind of activity coming from Republicans, against Democrats that they disapprove of. And I think it's a sober and chilling reminder of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, that vignette you mentioned, Carl, the woman that approached Katie Miller said, "We're watching you." And this was
Yeah.
the day after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. I mean, it's beyond harsh language, it's threatening language, and it's threatening violence, and in some cases outright violence. And, you know, I was thinking, as I normally do about this stuff, if the shoe was on the other foot. I mean, if you know, Lloyd
You can't go
Austin,
into a media rant. The media broke
if
the
Lloyd
story.
if
The
Lloyd
Atlantic broke this
Austin
story, Tom.
Yes,
if
Give him
Lloyd
credit.
it's one it's a single story in the Atlantic that is, I mean, how long has this been going on? It's months after the fact. If Lloyd Austin and Alejandro Mayorkas had to live in military housing for fear of their lives and livelihoods, that would be a massive story that the media would cover ad nauseum about how, the MAGA folks are so, violent and fascist and all this stuff. So it's just not, it's a double standard again that, and look, it is a serious problem. We do not want political violence in this country. It should not, we need to make this stuff, it needs to be marginalized, and people that do this need to be ostracized.
And I would say prosecuted.
Well, yeah, I mean, when they cross the,
You
You
brought
know,
up Charlie Kirk, but I remember this was years ago now. Antifa types went to Tucker Carlson's house in Washington, banged on his door. He wasn't even there. Threatened his wife, who was home alone.
Megan
It's
Kelly
why
just
it's
did
why
a
he
just
it's why
Yeah.
he moved out of Washington.
So
Megan Kelly
here's
just did
what-
a segment did a segment yesterday on all these folks who are dressing up like all these lefties who are dressing up like Charlie Kirk for Halloween with the freedom t-shirts on with like blood dripping down. I mean, this kind of stuff has to stop, and it's not stopping. It's going in the opposite direction, and so I think we need, and if we had, I think, more media coverage of it, there would be, I think, more outrage over it, hopefully, and that's the kind of response that's needed
yeah.
instead of just a single article in the Atlantic that we end up talking about on the radio.
I tell you why. And this article is very well reported. That's why I brought it up, and I commend it to people. Actually, Carl brought it to my attention. But one of the things they talk about in the article is this group. It's the Arlington Neighbors United for Humanity. So this is part of the story that I think is kind of interesting. Is this is sort of a neighborhood group that has taken on this task, and they've had organized protests near
Taking on the
Stephen
task
Miller's
of
home.
taking on the task of
Yes,
threatening-
here's what they say.
threatening people.
public officials.
Here's an
that's good.
Instagram post from them. So they've organized these protests near Stephen Miller's home and Russ Vought's home, the OMB head. And this is what they say: "Will we let him?" I think they were talking about Miller, "live in our community in peace while he terrorizes children and families? Not a chance." Carl, you're from Arlington. Does that sound like your neighbors? I mean, it just sounds. I can't imagine homeowners, responsible homeowners, acting this way towards, fellow homeowners, especially around Washington, where, if you live around Washington, and I lived there for 20 years, you see people who work in the administration at in Georgetown, you see them, out shopping. I mean, it is a city that is filled with sort of officials, and they come and go. And generally they're accepted because they're living there for a while, and they're doing the job that everyone is involved in Washington.
Well, I agree with you, Andy, but things are changing in this country. They're changing in Arlington. They're changing all over the place. You see those signs, those virtue signaling signs. Hate has no home here, and all the slogans. There's no such thing as an illegal person, and all. We like Muslims. We like Jews. We like gays. They don't like Republicans. That's what's always missing from those signs.
Right.
Their tolerance. They're tolerant of people who agree with them, which is
Right.
not the definition of tolerance. It's the definition of
The most liberal
intolerance.
neighborhoods in America are oftentimes the most illiberal
Yeah.
places
Yeah.
in America
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they don't tolerate any sort of dissent or any other viewpoint. And if you hold those viewpoints and you voice them, you get ostracized. You get absolutely, vilified by your neighbors.
Mhm.
But you know what? But Andy's right though, Tom. This goes beyond. This is like it's a form of terrorism. This
Mhm.
is really a next level of intolerance, and it's basically telling people what it's telling them they can't live in Arlington. Where can they live then? I
Yeah.
mean, where are they
Well, I
supposed
mean,
to live?
that's what anyway, read the article because you are struck by the fact that this is now considered sort of normal, acceptable HOA style behavior
Well,
in Arlington. Now,
well,
maybe they've
but
got it
look,
wrong, but
look,
it's a little crazy.
but Andy and Tom, both of you, the Atlantic is a very liberal news outlet. It broke this story. Its editors and reporters are clearly appalled by this behavior. So
Right. Yes.
So
Credit where
you're
credit
saying
is
there's a
due.
chance, Carl.
Good. Right. All right, guys. We got to take a quick break. We'll be back with more right after this. And it looks like, Carl, the AI revolution that you worry about is starting to show up in the employment figures. Amazon and UPS both reported this week that they were cutting about 14,000 jobs each. Target, Rivian, Booz Allen Hamilton, and GM are also reducing headcount, and they are all focused on management, these white-collar jobs that the companies seem to believe can be replaced by AI. So, Carl, the stock market loves all this efficiency, and no one has ever said that capitalism was always kind, but what do you make of what is going on in the American job market? And is AI behind all this?
well, it's not behind all of it, but the artificial intelligence it makes it easier to do some of these tasks that robotics. Look, mechanism came, first for the Industrial Revolution for manufacturing jobs, then agricultural jobs. Now it's coming for white collar jobs. This happens, and normally what happens is there turns out to be increased productivity, and on the other side of the rainbow, more jobs. Always scant consolation to people, who are 60-year-old blacksmiths when the automobile comes along, or factory workers in the Rust Belt. But overall, on a macro level, it's supposed to help. This feels qualitatively different because of the speed with which this is happening in industries that had never happened before. And we're just seeing the beginning of it. I was watching CNN today, and there was a robot. You can buy it that does housework, and it goes downstairs. Well, we're months into this, and we've already got robots. So this thing's going to increase as the AI increases. The robots will build other robots. Elon Musk talks about this. He says there are going to be 3 times as many robots as human beings, and it begs the question of in a free market economy, how do people get paid? How do they support themselves? What do they do for meaningful employment? And this is just the beginning. That's before the robots start killing us and decide to end the human race. We're just talking about employment today.
They're, before they kill you, they're going to clean your house and walk your dog.
Exactly.
But Tom, seriously, one of the things that struck me about this. Okay, so Robert Reich wrote a book back in the '90s, and he coined this frame: symbolic analysts who were going to rule the world. These were lawyers, engineers, journalists, consultants who were going to prosper because technology and globalization sort of extended their reach, and they were going to be the sort of people who were going to like most benefit from what was happening in the world. And this seems to me sort of the opposite of that, in
Right.
that the people who are going to suffer are the lawyers, or the accountants, are the consultants,
Totally.
are the journalists, writers, and podcasters, I suppose, at some point. So and I'm just wondering about the politics of this. When they come for those jobs, how do people react, and what does it mean politically, I guess?
I don't know what it means politically, but it is rapid creative destruction. It seems, as you mentioned, it's geared toward the professional class. I mean, AI is very quickly going to be able, already you know, can write legal briefs. But AI is still a long way away from having a robot that can fix your air conditioner,
Right.
right? Or your plumbing.
Says
So
you.
what's that?
Says you.
I've seen
Well,
those.
but I mean,
I've
I
seen
think
those robots that the housework robots. I'm not as worried about them as the robot who can do my taxes in a nanosecond. That I believe.
Well, yeah, I mean,
That's
even
going to
just the,
happen next year.
look, so I do think it is going to create a massive dislocation in the economy and the job market among sort of white collar professionals. We're starting to see that. And the question is, how does that play out? How do these folks find different jobs? They get retrained.
Yeah, but
It's going.
here's the problem with it. It's not just that this is the latest group because, you know, what did Biden say to, manufacturers, learn coding? Well, the robots
Right.
can code. That's the first thing they're going to learn to do. The point is, before there was mechanization and the farm jobs went, people said, well, go to college, get a job where you're working with your mind instead of your hands. The point isn't that these people, white collar people like us, are better than other people. It's that there's nowhere else to go. Then where's the next step? And you say they're going to be retrained to do what?
Plumbers.
Yeah,
We're going to
fix
need
your,
plumbers.
I mean,
Yeah.
look,
Electricians.
let's have Mike Rowe on the podcast and talk to him. He's been sounding this alarm for a long time,
Yeah.
and in sort of a different context before AI appeared on the scene. But the idea that like we had in this country we have denigrated people who work with their hands for a long time, but maybe the pendulum's swinging back in the other direction. Maybe now we're going to look at folks who work with their hands and folks in the trades and say, you know what, these are the kind of jobs that we need to train people if they want to have a future where they can provide for themselves, the family, be successful. Those might be the way to do that, as opposed to going to law school and spending $500,000 to get a law degree that's going to be obsolete in 6 months.
All right. Well, guys, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. But, if you're interested in technology, stick around because Carl is going to be here next. And he's got this fascinating interview with Larry Sanger, who's the co-founder of Wikipedia. So stick around for that. You're listening to Real Clear Politics. We'll be back after this.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief of Real Clear Politics. You're listening to us on SiriusXM Radio. I'm honored now to have as a guest Larry Sanger, who is the co-founder of Wikipedia. And if you are on Wikipedia sometimes and you see Jimmy Wales' name, Jimmy Wales says he's the founder. He was a co-founder. The two of them founded together. I remember when it happened. Jimmy Wales disputes this, but it's not really in contention. And Larry's actually been the one who came up with the name for Wikipedia. He's been away from the company for a long time now, though, and has some problems, as I do, with its direction. Sometimes, Larry, it's talked about that it's liberal bias, but to me, the problem's a little more profound than that. And this has nothing to do with Donald Trump. I began noticing this when I was covering the White House for the Baltimore Sun. I was covering George W. Bush, and I was looking up something. I was looking for a date on Prescott Bush, Bush's grandfather, who'd been a senator and gone to Yale. And there was all this sort of wacky left-wing fringe stuff, like like the Lyndon LaRouche people had put it up or something about Nazi arms sales, and it was libelous and it was just inaccurate. It was misleading. It's not what I wanted. And I thought, boy, this thing's already off the rails. And now a lot of people have come to this conclusion, but I guess I want to ask you before we'll get in later because you have a very interesting idea how to fix it. But what happened? Why did it go off the rails so quickly? Because it's such a brilliant idea.
There's different ways to explain it, and that are consistent with each other, different aspects of a problem. I think, for one thing, we very early on got on the radar of powerful people who were trying to control the narrative, as we now say. I mean, the first outlets to advertise in a major way in the mainstream media, Wikipedia, were the New York Times, actually, and MIT Technology Review. It's like two bastions of the establishment. At the same time, there were a bunch of people who had come over from the then sort of libertarian left-leaning Slashdot, who had invaded in the first year when I was still there. And they weren't there for the first 6 months, but after that, they kind of set the tone of the project, which I guess you could say I resisted because I wanted it to be open to a large number of people. I was actually fighting on behalf of experts, of academics, people who like, okay, maybe they actually are kind of lean left a lot more now too. But nevertheless, they had good judgment. But almost out of the gate is what I'm saying. There were some issues, but there were enough, we got a solid enough start with the people who were from Newpedia that for several years we were able to get Wikipedia into good habits, I think. So it had a very good start, and I think there was kind of a kind of decline and a kind of maturation at the same time. The decline was what you observed. The radicals moved in. They were encouraged to move in, I think, by the people who essentially took over the project. But at the same time, slowly, I mean, it was very gradual, actually, although it really ramped up about 2015, 2016. The screws tightened. The range of views that were permitted in the platform just became narrower and narrower.
Well, this was a thing, Brexit was a shot to the system of the establishment. And I get that. And a shot to the elites. And I'm not a person who goes around ridiculing expertise. You can quickly go too far with some of this. But then, the sort of double advent of Brexit and then the rise of Donald Trump, it seemed to scare the gatekeepers. And again, for some understandable reasons. But then this idea that you're going to deal with it by censorship struck me as really quite the opposite of what the people were demanding. It misread the moment. It misread what populists didn't like about elitists. It confirmed their worst fears about people like me, frankly, and you who had education. So I never understood that. And then they brought in this. She now runs NPR, but this woman who was in charge, head of Wikipedia, and
Yes.
she gave a TED talk and she kind of revealed it.
Yes.
The phrase people use today that read the quiet part out loud. I prefer reading the stage directions, but it was worse than that. She acted as though the First Amendment and the whole concept of free expression is an inconvenience and really a barrier to what she was trying to do, which is, I guess, social engineering or progressive politics. I'm not sure. She never quite said, but this idea that you build a consensus, and that sounds good, but they don't mean consensus. They mean stifling other voices. It means a narrative, an approved narrative, and other narratives are devalued or banned. Am I overstating the problem?
Not at all. So yes, Catherine Mayer, I think bears some responsibility. I think it was already ramping up. But she bragged about being in contact with government operatives that were trying to control the narrative. In another video that has emerged.
Is that during the COVID period, or was it
Yes.
the
I believe
election integrity thing?
I believe so.
Yeah.
So in 2018, an anonymous Mr. X, that's the name of the account, inaugurated a list, which really is a blacklist of approved and disapproved media sources. And I actually don't know how Real Clear Politics fits there. I don't know if it's green lit or your yellow, but they have a color coding of sources, and so Fox News political reporting is red, which means basically cannot be used if you're making assertions of fact. Even if you attribute the reporting to Fox News. Same way with the New York Post, the Federalist, any number of others. And, of course not Tucker Carlson or anyone who is firmly on the right. So it has become very difficult.
Why did Jimmy allow that? That's really an anathema to the original spirit of Wikipedia.
I learned something I didn't know. I haven't really been following Jimmy that much, but I learned recently that he is now a Labor Party voter,
Hmm.
and he used to be a libertarian.
Mhm.
I still am a conservatarian, but basically a libertarian. I think what he has said, anyway, and I can't speak for him, obviously, but what he has said is essentially that those blacklisted sources simply can't be trusted because they're purveyors of disinformation. The usual sort of line about
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah.
Even though, in my opinion, and I've consumed a lot of this stuff in the last 10 years. I think outlets like uh, Epoch Times and even Breitbart, I read them and I think whatever their sins in the past might have been, they seem to be doing pretty good work now. And
Well,
so,
but you don't want to vouch for these sites on, in a general way. Every story is
yeah,
different, but a facts, Fox News spends more money on factual based reporting, probably 10 times as much as MSNBC, for instance. I mean, they have these reporters, and a lot of them are veterans of venerable news organizations. Britt Hume, who became a star at Fox, covered the White House with me. He was with ABC, and he reported with Peter Jennings every day. So these people, they don't really know much about the media. These people who make these grand pronouncements, in my experience. And Larry is trying to reform this Frankenstein that he created. He's got a plan, 9 theses, you call it. Larry, do you mind just going through the nine? It's not 95 like Martin Luther, so we can mention nine on the radio.
sure. So, in the same way that Martin Luther launched, he didn't know at the time, but he did launch the Reformation of the Catholic Church with his 95 Theses, I propose to launch a reformation of Wikipedia with 9 theses. And this is a combination of criticisms and very practical, I think quite reasonable proposals. Now, the insiders in Wikipedia, some of them resist strongly. I've been surprised at how much some of them actually have been behind these. But from anybody else's point of view, these are all very reasonable. So, number one, end decision making by consensus, faux consensus. Number two, enable competing articles. There's only one article per topic now, end that. Number three, abolish source blacklists, as I was describing. Number four, revive the original neutrality policy. Their notion of neutrality now is really twisted into its opposite. Number five, repeal ignore all rules, which is a sort of tongue-in-cheek rule that I made a long time ago. Number six, reveal who Wikipedia's leaders are, because 85% of the most powerful accounts on Wikipedia are anonymous. Number seven, let the public rate articles. So, well, I suppose that's self-explanatory. That is not supported by the current system. Number eight, end indefinite blocking. So right now, it's just way too common for accounts to be blocked altogether for trivial reasons. And number nine, adopt a legislative process. Wikipedia lacks any method of major reform. I think they should have a constitutional convention to allow that.
I want to ask you about a couple of them. First of all, who owns it? So what is the mechanism for changing this? Could Jimmy Wales decree this? I mean, let's start with that. How, what's the mechanism for reform?
He could not, in fact, do that. He lacks the power. He is, I think, a permanent member of the board of directors of the Wikimedia Foundation, but they too disclaim the authority to make such changes. But as a matter of fact, from a legal point of view, they do have that.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to ask you. So they actually could do it. This boasting about anarchy, they literally say, no, the inmates are running the asylum. We like it that way, and we can't do anything about it. But you're saying they could do something about it if they wanted to.
Yes, especially some of them are very much in their wheelhouse and would be difficult, in fact, I think, to legitimize simply through the rank and file processes, like adopting a legislative process. That would change the legal structure of the organization, if I'm not mistaken. And
Well,
therefore, it's something that only the legal owners would be able to do.
Yeah, well, there's something about it. Someone will object, there'll be an article and it's one-sided, and people will go in there and say, no, that's not what happened, and change it. And then the original person, anonymous to the public, goes in and changes it back. I mean, there's this, it's, in any organization, I don't care if you're on the, you know, the board of directors of your local softball league, the
Mhm.
people who have the most time to spend tend to be the quirkiest and most extreme and most difficult kind of personalities in any organization. And it seems to me Wikipedia has fallen victim to this dynamic that you don't even know who these people are, but they don't seem to have full-time jobs. Their full-time job is to make sure that they can slime somebody they don't like on Wikipedia and resist any change to that. If you had transparency that you're talking about, and that exists, every news organization has the editor's page where you say, who owns it,
Mhm.
who's the editorial page editor, who's there, wouldn't that be an easy thing to do? And wouldn't most of the Wikipedia editors actually welcome it?
They would be very resistant to any suggestion that collaboration be done away with as a process. Um, so I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think that it's reasonable that at least they get rid of this fantasy that the often strange radical people um, who declare a consensus, that what they are doing actually is declaring a consensus. They're simply making a decision. So that's the first of the theses. But I think the only way for this to change is for a whole flood of new people to come into the Wikipedia system and try to take things in hand. I think with great enough numbers, this is possible. And the number of people who are actually actively on, at work on Wikipedia any given month is surprisingly small. We're
Really?
talking, yes, in the hundreds. The number
Hundreds.
of people who make over 100 edits, which is actually not that many if you understand the Wikipedia process. It's like 3,500. But if you actually want to make it sort of a serious hobby, something that you spend many hours over the course of a month on, yeah, the number is just in the hundreds.
All
So
right, well, that anticipates my final question. We have about a minute left. If it's if this reforms that you're proposing don't take root, if they resist it, would you be amenable to starting a rival, Wikipedia, challenge your own baby and set it up the way you're talking about, and go out and find those several hundred people it would take to do it?
uh, been there, done that. I have no desire to try again. I can tell you that the set of all of the encyclopedias is much better, greater, more diverse than just Wikipedia by itself. So that's actually what I'm promoting now. Now I'm the president of the Knowledge Standards Foundation, and we are collecting all the free encyclopedias in a single database that uses a uniform data format called the ZWI file format. So, and that's all free. All the data is free, and anyone can build on top of it. I'm just sort of hoping that when it's more mature, that search engines and now LLMs will make use of the data. And then, of course, there's Grokpedia, which just launched very recently, and um, I think they have a shot at being a very serious competitor of Wikipedia.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you. You've been listening to Larry Sanger, co-founder of Wikipedia and a ardent and optimistic reformer. I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief, Real Clear Politics. You've been listening to us on SiriusXM Radio or on our podcast, and we'll be back tomorrow, Friday, at the same time. Good evening.